On her wedding day, Barbara was nervous as hell. Not because she was unsure about marrying Larry, the love of her life, but because she was meeting his mother for the first time. Larry had always held that back with various excuses, but now he had no choice. But Barbara would soon find out why Larry had a very good reason for keeping his mother out of the relationship. Before we start, can we get this video to 1,000 likes? Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Barbara has been the happiest woman since her boyfriend of almost 2 years asked her to marry him. She was pleased with the turn of events because being with Larry forever was one of her greatest wishes. But as happy as she was, there were still some questions in her head that she couldn't answer or distract. Barbara's doubts stemmed from one particular thing that made her relationship with Larry different from any other love affair she'd had in the past. Her relationship with Larry was different from others because he didn't really want to include her in his family. Whenever the issue was raised, Larry always replied that he acted that way because he didn't have the best relationship with his family. Barbara didn't care much about Larry's actions at first, especially since nobody likes meeting his in-laws. But as time passed and things got more serious, she felt like she had to figure out what was going on. Shortly after Larry proposed to Barbara, she asked if she could finally meet his parents. At Barbara's request, Larry expressed displeasure and was absolutely against it. His reaction struck Barbara as odd, and she couldn't hide her surprise. When Larry saw the change in Barbara's facial expression, he replied that it really wasn't necessary and that he was afraid they might not get along. Larry left most of the wedding planning to Barbara. Since Larry only provided the money needed for the wedding to be a success without caring about the plan itself, Barbara was able to hatch some schemes behind his back. This was easy for her as she didn't need to get Larry's approval before making any decisions or arrangements, at least for now. Although she was determined to invite Larry's family to the wedding to meet them, Barbara knew she would face some challenges. The first obstacle to her decision was her need to connect with them. This was difficult for her as she had no contact information of Larry's family members. Reaching a family member of Larry's was harder than she thought. This was because Larry was not on any social media platforms, so there was no potential connection through the usual avenues. Barbara decided to stop searching online for contact information of Larry's relatives. Instead, she decided to focus on the wedding. The woman concluded that if she met up with his side of the family on the wedding day, she would make sure they left the day with a great impression of her. Despite being together so much now and making sure everything would be perfect, Barbara had yet to tell Larry that she had invited his side of the family as well. The event had started. Barbara and Larry had made their way to the venue early enough to personally greet all the guests as they poured in. It was amazing to Barbara that all her friends and family came to her celebration day, even though it was what she really wanted her plan to be revealed. But she was disappointed. When most of the guests had come in, the bride quickly realized that she knew everyone there. Not a single person from Larry's family had shown up yet, while she was expecting at least 20 people from his side of the family. It was now more than half an hour since the last guest had come in. Her hope faded. Although everyone else on the invitation list had turned up in festive attire, she was a little disgusted. Wouldn't they show up at all? Maybe Larry's mom didn't spread the invite, or did everyone just choose not to come? Unfortunately, she couldn't share those feelings with the love of her life. Barbara was getting very disappointed, but she still didn't want to tell Larry that. He really enjoyed it because in his eyes everything went as expected and smoothly. As she persevered at the front desk entrance, he had no idea anyone else would show up. Barbara gave up as she felt it was more important that the wedding proceed normally. Whether Larry's family was here or not, this was still her wedding anniversary, and she was going to enjoy it to the fullest. The bride suppressed her disappointment and joined her friends at a bar table. Having fun with the guests present, she needed a reminder to start the final preparations for the wedding. Thoughts of Larry's mother were gone from her mind, but not for long. Many people noticed that there were still many places available. Only Barbara knew exactly who these seats were reserved for. But as the guests speculated about the empty seats, the attention of the room quickly turned to the rear. Barbara was there, in her wedding dress, and she had started walking down the hall. She smiled from ear to ear, realizing that nothing could ruin this moment for her. Except when Barbara walked all the way, arm in arm with her father to take the stage. She came face to face with the love of her life, Larry. Then, just as the official part was about to begin, they were interrupted by the opening of the altar doors. It slowly opened, and as it did, a woman walked in. Everyone looked at her and then at the people around her. No one in the crowd seemed to recognize the woman, who quickly walked past the rows onto the front stage. At that moment, Barbara noticed that Larry turned pale as a sheet when he saw her face. For her, there was no doubt who she was. Before she could say anything, Larry had already stepped to the edge of the stage. There he was, angry and face to face with the woman in front of him. "What are you doing here, Mom? Go away!" He shouted it so loudly that the echoes of the high room fell silent for at least a few seconds. The woman wasn't impressed and didn't seem at all bothered by the distraught faces around her. She actually grinned at Larry and told him that she was invited here and therefore had every right to stay. The groom then turned to Barbara, shocked and confused. The look in his eyes said more than words ever could. Barbara just realized that she screwed up inviting his mother over here. There was no doubt about that. She had stepped out of line by contacting Larry's family without even letting him know. What followed was that Barbara was overcome with emotion. At one point, she even started screaming that she wanted the wedding to stop entirely. Although Larry was still shaking with anger, he focused on reassuring his wife-to-be. Meanwhile, several of Barbara's family members helped escort Larry's mother out of the venue. They didn't understand exactly what was going on, but thought it best to at least remove this woman from the room. The groom took the bride's arm, and they followed each other to another room on one side of the stage. The master of ceremonies announced that everyone should remain seated during this break. Larry was finally able to tell the truth about his family and why he didn't want them here. It was a long story. Apparently, he had lied about visiting his mother and other family members for the past several years. He didn't want to give Barbara a reason to worry about his relationship with them. Larry had been meeting up with friends during this time, and in fact, he hadn't seen family in years. Barbara was shocked while Larry continued. His mother had never been good to him when raising him, while his father was never in the picture at all. Other family members had never supported him either. They always chose his mother's side, and when Larry turned 18, he left the family, never to see her again. Barbara was devastated that she had exposed Larry to this danger on what was supposed to be the best day of her life. Seeing how difficult it was for Larry to share the stories of his past, she quickly decided to forgive him for lying to her. Somehow she was glad to finally know the truth. The wedding went on. All that calmed down while the master of ceremonies entertained the guests. Larry and Barbara got married, and after that they were able to talk about his problems much more openly. Ultimately, inviting Larry's mother that day had been the best way to cement their relationship as husband and wife.